Eden Koz here with Just Be, and we are about to take a spiritual boom. We are at an unprecedented time in human history where we are transitioning from 3D to 5D within the great spiritual awakening. This video and audio podcast is the place for you to find your truth beyond politics, your sovereignty, your voice. Let's kick up your vibration now. By the way, each episode ends with the Just Be practice to do just that. P.S. Just to know a little bit more about me, I'm a psychological empath, meditation master, dimensional healer, all the things to help you within this ascension. To learn more about me, visit me at edenjustbe.com. And let's get this party started. High energy, Scott. I bring high energy to the show. So a lot of times I just, get ready.
Love it.
Okay. Heavy metal, bring it on.
That's right.
Eden here. Just Be Spiritual Boom in association with the wonderful Grassroots Warrior Network. I am so excited and so blessed to be a part of these courageous souls, heartfelt souls telling the truth of politics, spirituality, all of that. And I'm included in that, and I'm so grateful. And I told Scott earlier, hello. Let's stop for just a minute. So Scott von Heldt, please say hello before I continue.
Hello, and hello, Eden. Thanks for having me.
You are so welcome. I'm going to attempt to keep this podcast under 50 minutes. We'll see how that goes. Usually it's just a little bit of an hour, but I feel like if I get it right under there, that's going to help a lot of people. All right. May I read your bio, please?
Absolutely.
Okay. And y'all know, and I told Scott too, that I before the shows, I always see how to pronounce things correctly. But when it comes time, I am not so great at that. That is a weakness that I have. I guess you could want to call it a weakness or a propensity that I have. Maybe that's even better. Sikander, and we'll have you explain that later. Scott van Heldt, SVH, is a lifelong professional musician, author, spiritual guide, and cannabis wellness coach. We have a lot to talk about today. He has toured the world and recorded with members of Korn, White Zombie, Limp Bizkit, Cirque du Soleil, and many more. In 2008, he released his first book, I love this, Mind Over Metal, The Musician's Guide to Mental Mastery, and has served as a longtime staff writer for many publications worldwide. Scott went on to become a healing conductor, healing retreat guide, Night of Purity, and Anaya Sufi order? How'd I say it? How'd I do?
Anaya.
Okay.
That was good. That was close. Anaya.
All right. Anaya. Okay. In 2020, he completed his training to become a representative in the Anaya. And now, hopefully I got that right. He runs classes and events at their center, the Church of All, in Los Angeles, California, which is where he is. All right. And Scott, I wanted to ask you, because I get many questions because I've been doing heavy duty spiritual work for a long time. Is Eden your real name? And I'm like, yeah, it sure is. Is Scott van Heldt your real name? Because that is a very rockerish name.
Yeah, I have a lot of names and a lot of stories behind the names. So I was actually born little Scotty Held, Held was my last name, Held. And, I got into music at an early age. And in my teenage years, I really, was an aspiring rock star, right? So I was like, Held just is not a rock and roll name. It just, Scott Held just doesn't, it doesn't.
I held you.
Yeah. I mean, it is beautiful from that standpoint. But yeah, so one day I was sitting around talking with the family, and my dad says, well, why don't you use the German version of the name, which was von Heldt. Your great-great-grandfather, when he came over from Germany, he had to change his surname from von Heldt to Held. And I was like, yeah, that sounds like Van Halen. I'm in, So that became my stage name. And then right out of high school, I actually changed it legally to von Heldt because that was my profession. And then the SVH part of it came from, that was just like a nickname. It was, taking the S and the B and the H from Scott von Heldt. And I did a solo cassette when I was 17. I skipped school for a day my senior year and went down to a recording studio in Gibsonburg, Ohio, and recorded this whole album, and I put in the liner notes that I'll see you all on the world tour of Sandusky, which is just this little town that I was from, and I signed it SVH, and everybody's been calling me SVH now for, over 30 years. So just kind
Wow.
of stuck. Sikander is my spiritual name that was given to me by my Sufi guide. So when I took initiation into the Sufi order, I was given the name Sikander, which has some different meanings. It really kind of denotes leadership. It's the Persian version of Alexander, is what it is. So,
Very neat. And it's really neat that your last name really is your last name, but it's
yeah,
just a different version of it. That's super cool. And it was really neat when Scott and I first connected, knowing that I'm from Georgia, but living in Ohio now, that you're from Ohio, from Sandusky.
yeah,
I thought that was awesome. Uh,
yeah.
is there any way, can you turn up your volume at all?
I can try. Let me get into my
Okay.
here while we're chatting and see if I can crank it up a little bit. I can
Oh,
still look closer too.
yep, that helped. So the first thing I wanted to ask you while you're doing this, and tell me if you can talk at the same time,
Certainly.
I want to know how you begin. This is always my first question, typically, the Great Awakening or this huge evolution in consciousness that is happening right now. How did you become connected to that?
Well, hopefully that's a little better. I was raised in a Christian family. My dad was a church choir director. So I was kind of born into spiritual life, so to speak. And around the age of 8, I had a real encounter with the Holy Spirit. We had an altar call at church, and I felt the need to go up, and I had this real experience where I really felt the presence of God enter. I really, that was very strong for me at an early age. I'd also had a lot of experiences with dreams, dream work, and things like that at a young age, and that really kind of always piqued my interest in higher spirituality and different types of consciousness and things. So over the years, I just, kind of grabbed on whatever made sense. Unfortunately, I was about, I don't know, I want to say maybe 14, 15 or so. My dad did some things that were questionable, that didn't quite jive with what I was raised to believe was Christian like activity. So I started to really question my religion and my faith. And, if these people are telling me this is the path and they're not staying on the path, then what is the path? And, being in such a restrictive, religion, it was a real eye opener for me because, we probably wouldn't have seen a Buddhist monk walk down the street at that age in Sandusky, Ohio. But had I seen one, I probably would have said, that poor soul, he's going to hell because he doesn't know Jesus. And for me, that was a big eye opener when I kind of had this realization that maybe there's more to this God thing than what I've been brought to know. And so I started really studying different things. I started reading, every spiritual book that I could get my hands on. I read the Satanic Bible because I wanted to know what was so terrible about it, and what, all these different things. And as I started to read these, I started to see a little thread of connection between them all. And I started to see like the peeling away of the layers. And when you peel the layers away, you've got this thread of truth that runs between them all. And I noticed that early on. And I moved to California probably, I was about 21 years ago now. And I was really into martial arts. I studied martial arts for quite a long time. Really got into kung fu, and the idea of chi energy was so interesting to me. And as a musician, I was really interested in, like, why do I like Pantera and somebody else likes Pavarotti? Like, I'm into this heavy metal stuff, and I can stand certain operatic things, and why is that? And I really wanted to understand that. So I really dove into searching a lot of that information as well. And so I was really into Bruce Lee, really into Zen and Buddhism. And then I got into Taoism, and I was like, maybe I'm a Taoist. Maybe that's my thing, So I moved out here riding that wave of the Taoism. And I had lived here probably not quite a year, and I worked at a music store, and I had a friend that worked there that, just being fully transparent, she was my pot smoking buddy. After work, we'd go, hang out and smoke a little herb together. And one of her friends in a different department said, hey, you should go get this book by Hazrat Inayat Khan called the Music of Life. And
Mm.
she told me about it. And there was this great bookstore in LA for a long time called the Bodhi Tree. And so she said, let's go to the Bodhi Tree after work. So we went over to the Bodhi Tree and she found the book, The Music of Life. And I was looking through and I found this other book by Hazrat Inayat Khan called The Mysticism of Music and Sound. And the title alone just kind of like, whoa, it hit me. And I pulled this book off the shelf and I looked, I'm probably going to cry. I just to be honest, every time I tell this story, it really wells up in me because it's like just the whole experience again.
Yeah.
Um, but I pulled this book off the shelf and I turned and looked at it, and this Indian mystic on the front with this beautiful countenance holding this veena, which is kind of like a sitar-like instrument, and he's looking at the camera in the photo, and the eyes just cut through me. It was like, wow, and I wasn't really hip to Indian mystics or anything like that at the time. Um, and it just really struck me the picture. I never really had an experience like that, looking at a photo and like feeling like a connection with the person. I opened the book. This is where I always tear up. I opened the book, and what I read was, to attain spirituality is to realize that the whole universe is one symphony in which we each have our own individual note. And I stood in that bookstore thinking, what the hell is my note? you know,
Yes.
I moved out here to be a rock star, right?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to find my way spiritually, and I want to uplift people. I want to empower people. I want people to feel uplifted and good. But I'm screaming heavy metal music. I'm yelling. I'm screaming. I'm always angry. It's always the anger that's being projected. What am I doing? Um, so I bought the book and read it 2 or 3 times within like the first month that I had it, and I was just so in awe. Now, who Hazrat Inayat Khan is? He actually brought Indian classical music to the West. He and his brothers had a group called the Royal Musicians of Hindustan, and they came to the West to do and this is probably 110 years ago or so.
Okay.
And so they brought this Indian classical music to the West, and they would tour around and do these performances, and people just didn't know what the hell they were getting into. They were like the microtones and the little extra notations and the extra emphatic singing and everything. People just didn't know how to take it. It was so foreign to what we understood as music in the West
Mm-hmm.
at that time. And so, they continued on doing what they did. They got picked up by an Oriental dancer that was doing these Oriental dances, and she had them as their kind of backing musicians for a while. And
Okay.
Hazrat Inayat Khan started. His teacher had told him before he had told him to go to the West and unite East and West through your music, and so he made the decision that he actually needed to give up his music. Because it had done all for him that he wanted it to do, or felt that it was meant to do. And he really started teaching Sufism. So he started giving these lectures on the spiritual art of Sufism. And Sufism is really, it gets misinterpreted a lot as Islamic mysticism. It did flourish through a lot of Islamic places. And a lot of Muslims do believe that Sufism is the heart of Islam. But it's a non-religious path. It doesn't really ascribe to any one religion. There's a lot of belief that Jesus was a Sufi. There's a lot of Moses. There's a lot of these great masters over the years that have taken this thread of wisdom of all religions and put it together into a cohesive, unified concept. And that's really what Sufism is. So yeah, I got this book and I read it a few times, and I learned that it was a path of initiation where you actually found a guide and you would take an initiation and become a pupil and have a guide. And I really, after a few months, I felt like this was really right for me. So I started looking around and searching, and I found a woman up the street from me, a mile up the road, who studied with Hazrat Inayat Khan's son for 35 years.
No way. Right up the road from you.
Yeah.
Coincidence? No.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, and his name was Pierre Vilayet. Pierre Vilayet was a very well-known figure in the 60s and 70s, right alongside Ram Dass and a lot of the guys at that counterculture movement
Mhm.
at that time. Pierre Vilayet was a very well-known teacher. And yeah, so I went and met with her, went to a couple classes and took initiation, and I just never turned back. I just keep going. And we're in the process now where, as you mentioned, it's a little process to get to the point where you can actually teach and initiate other people and be a guide. But I did complete that training about a year ago, and now I co-run the center here in Los Angeles. And we're actually in the process of moving to a new location, and I'm probably
Oh
going to be
gosh.
running that center myself with her help on the side, because she's kind of ready to retire and spend some time with family and things like that. She has students all over the world. Her name is Tasneem, and she does a really beautiful practice called the Dances of Universal Peace, which is part of the Sufi tradition, where people come together of all faiths, all religions, and they will do a dance that incorporates a song of a particular religion, and then they do another religion's song, and the dances and the
Interesting.
movements and everything. It's a way of getting everybody in the space to really tune into each other and get a little experience of what the other person really feels. So when you're a Christian and you're listening to this beautiful Jewish song that's being sung, and you're in that experience, and they light up, and then you start to say, hey, I see why they light up. It was good. And then you get a chance that by the end of these sessions,
Wow.
people are just in a whole ecstatic state. So that's really what got me started on it. Was really discovering that my true spiritual path was reading that book in that bookstore and pulling that off the shelf, and my life hasn't been the same since.
Wow. Okay. I was going to ask you to describe Sufism. Can you go back to it again? Kind of, is it, I had a client who was a Sufi a while back. Does it really, is it like a philosophy that connects, finds the strand within religion that connects us all? Is that a good way to say it? Or how else would you?
Yeah, I kind of I don't even like it's hard because you're not even really supposed to claim you're a Sufi, and you're not really supposed to, in that essence, because it's something that can't be put into words, right?
Mhm.
God is so
Yes.
vast and tremendous. You can't put God into any bucket and say this is God. It's not possible. So with Sufism, I personally think it is that thread that connects all religions, because it is that place of unity that we come from. It's that recognition that all things are God, all things come from God, all things live. We say a couple great Sufi sayings are, we're closer to God than the fish are to the sea, or He's closer to us than our own jugular vein. And if you think about those kind of
Yeah.
terminologies and those kinds of things, Rumi was probably the most popular Sufi. Rumi was a Sufi poet. Um, so it's really looking at the beauty of all things, seeing the connectivity of all things, seeing that we are really all a note within that symphony, and not seeing the symphony as a separate part from the note, right? Because without the note, the symphony wouldn't exist. And another way of looking at it is, God is the sun, and we're all rays of the sun, there's no disconnect there. Sometimes the ray is clouded, sometimes there's other things that impede that, but the ray and the sun are all one. It's all the same light. So that's really how I describe Sufism a lot, is that it really is kind of that thread of truth that runs through all religions and runs through all beliefs. Some people see it as a religion, some people see it as a path, some people see it as a
Mm.
philosophy, and it,
Mhm.
it can be all those things, really.
Mhm. Oh, yeah, really nice way of describing that too. And it's in these times of purposeful division, and it's so lovely that there are these paths out there that basically say it's all okay. It's
Yeah,
all okay.
absolutely, absolutely.
I did want to ask you this for a moment before, because I want to go into, oh, there's so much to go into. Saying that I was going to try and shorten this up. We'll see. I did want to ask you, since you are in the rock world, I want to know what your note is a little bit later. So I want to know your take, or if you've heard anything about this was in 2017, the apparent suicide of Chris Cornell of Soundgarden and Chester Bennington of Lincoln Park. And just to give others who may not be familiar, with this. Their suicide deaths, I'm using air quotes here, were in months of each other. There was a Haiti connection, which is also connected to Anthony Bourdain, who reportedly committed suicide. Potentially, John Podesta was Chester's father. The Clinton Foundation was tied into it. And potentially, Chris and Chester were about to out a lot of famous people in terms of sex trafficking and pedophilia. Have you heard about that at all in your world? What do you think, Scott?
I appreciate you bringing that up.
Ooh.
Inshallah, Lord willing, I hope they're both still alive. And I think that they may be. And I hope that they're in some sort of a witness protection program or something like that, because yes, I do believe that they were on the right path, and we were about to they were working on a documentary film together about pedophilia and about human trafficking and all the things that we see in Hollywood that that we're starting to hear about, that a lot of people call us all conspiracy nuts and things like that, right? And this is a really big issue for me, being a musician, being an artist, being from heavy metal and hard rock, and a lot of darker themes in a lot of the music. I have a 12-year-old daughter now, and my biggest problem is with music. The stuff that she listens to, the things that I hear, I'm like, man, this is a 14-year-old girl singing about sleeping in the bed that we made and things like that. It's just, so now I understand what my parents were yelling about, some of those things that I was listening to maybe back in the day. But
Yes.
in terms of those two gentlemen, they were lights. They were strong, powerful lights. I had the opportunity to see both of them live. I saw Linkin Park very early on in their career. Got a chance to meet Chester early on, and just great people. And I do truly believe that they were on a mission to right the wrongs and out some of this. And yeah, unfortunately, when people start to speak out about truth, there's a risk and a danger that comes over them. But I would like to believe that they're still alive in some sort of a witness protection program, and I certainly hope we get to hear them sing again.
Very nice. Wonderful. And going along to that, how do you see how to formulate this question? Do you ride both sides of the fence? Have you seen a lot in your own in terms of being a professional musician and being mixed in with some well-known people? How do you do both parts? Does that make sense? Did I word that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, when I started out in music, I really wasn't as spiritually adept as I am now. I
Okay.
had a lot of ego. I had a lot of issues. I drank heavily. I was the life of the party. I still had this spiritual undertone that was always there. And I always
Mm.
wanted to do something good with music. I always wanted to be uplifting. But I did kind of fall into that trap for a while where I had to be the life of the party and things like that, and kind of went along with the whole rock star image. But I thankfully grew out of that. I credit my wife for a lot of that, help me get out of those mindsets. But no, it's a great question, because it is a fine line, and there are times now that I look back. I did this professionally until about maybe 12 years ago. And I got off the road really because of financial reasons, and because I was about to be a dad, and I just, had to be responsible and do the right thing. And now I'm actually tighter with the music community now than I was then, because I represent a lot of these guys in the cannabis space. So through the connections that I have now in that industry, a lot of these guys that I looked up to growing up are now my clients. So it's been kind of interesting to see, and I've had these conversations with a lot of them. I just putting it straight out there. My friend Stephen Carpenter, the guitar player from Deftones. He is my conspiracy theory buddy. We've had hours and hours of conversations about flat Earth, about the only thing that's been sent to the moon is our imagination. It's just a really great
Great say.
conversation. So there are some really awake people, I think, not woke, but awake, awakened individuals out there that are successful and haven't succumbed to that side of it. But it's a real thing, and I'm really close friends with probably one of the most well-known rappers out there. Be Real from Cypress Hill has been a client of mine for a couple of years, and B has had those conversations about the Illuminati and how, things like that. And he's like, hey, I'm not in that club. I wouldn't be sitting here doing this podcast with everybody else if I wasn't, if I was in that club. And he's Ice Cube coming out recently and going and doing these tours. You see Kanye West came out in the last year and really exposed a lot of truth of what's going on in Hollywood and the entertainment industry. So I personally think I was plucked out of it. I think if I would have stayed in it, I might have. I know I would never. I know I always have my limits. Like there's certain things I would never do for the sake of music. But you can see how easily people can go down the dark road, and especially when alcohol and drugs and things like that are in the mix, and then money gets thrown around. So you see a lot of these young artists today that are they're paid. They're paid to do whatever they're told. Whether it's sexual favors for the people in the industry. Like really perverted, sick, grotesque stuff, whether it's the adrenochrome, whether it's all these different aspects of what we see out there. But it's the selling of your soul, and my soul is too important. It doesn't belong to me. It's God's, it's all one. I'm connected with God. It's not my soul to sell. So I can't go down that road, but I've seen it close enough to know that had I stayed in, I probably would have been further exposed and could have gone down, some dark paths. So I think the good Lord plucked me at the right time.
Plucked you out. And part of it too is also being blackmailed, or we're going to hurt your family. Like I think there are a lot of darker things versus, hey, we're just going to give you money. We're really going to hurt you if you don't do what we want you to do. So it is. I'm so, I guess, excited for you that you didn't have to confront any of that and you were plucked out in really good timing. Thank you so much for sharing all of that as well. One of my dear clients helped me come up with some questions because I do want to go into the cannabis wellness side of you. Or is it good to transfer into that at this moment?
Yeah.
Nice. All right. Let's see. What do I want to ask?
I'm sitting right now at one of the largest cannabis distribution offices in the state of California.
Okay. So let's go into that first. How did you route into this?
I was always anti-cannabis. The way that it was exposed to me first was when I was a young boy. We had this guy in the neighborhood that used to drive his van with the door open and a big weed flag on the side of it, and shirtless guy. And my parents called him Freakus, right? So Freakus was my first experience with potheads.
Oh my gosh! So now you're Freakus.
Yeah, I'm the new Freakus. Yeah, I'm that guy. But no, so early on it was always taboo, and it was always just not something that I ever really considered of interest. I started playing in bands early on. I was I think a junior in high school when I was playing bars and nightclubs, and that was when my parents were going through their split. So I think they were a little lenient, let me kind of do that at the time. But no, I lost my train of thought there for a sec. Okay, so I never was into cannabis. I did drinking cannabis, all that. I did get into alcohol, kind of, into my early 20s. That kind of time frame. But cannabis was something I always veered away from. But I was probably about 23 or 24, and a couple of my bandmates, we used to rehearse every weekend, and we had our studio kind of down the street from where my apartment was. So we had a couple guys that came in an hour from out of town to rehearse, and they would come in and we'd rehearse on Friday. They'd stay at my place, and then we'd rehearse on a Saturday, and then they'd take off. So one night they came in after practice and they smelled like a skunk, and I was like, "What's up?" And they're like, "What do you mean, what's up?" And I was like, "You're not going to offer me any?" And they're like, "You're not going to do that stuff." And I was like, "Look, I trust you guys. I see you guys are smoking this stuff every weekend. Like, we got nowhere to go, nothing to do. Let me try it, And I had tried one or two times before in college, but I didn't get any effect. I smoked it and didn't feel anything, which was interesting. So I was like, it's not for me. It doesn't do anything. But this time it did, and I just, after a few hits, I just felt I was an ADHD riddling child. So for me, like all of that went away. My focus level was like right there. I felt calm. I felt relaxed. All my anger, all my frustration, everything was just out the window. And we sat and listened to some music together, and I heard music differently than I'd heard it before. I could really hear the little nuances and little things that I didn't notice before, and stuff that I'd listened to over and over and over, because I was always
Wow.
focusing on the guitar parts, right? But I was hearing all the other nuances and the other things, and it just really opened my mind to it. So it kind of became a weekend thing, and then it became a weekday thing, and it just kind of became a bigger part of my life over those next couple of years. And then
Hey, look, can I, for a moment, I guess I do need to ask you, what do you play guitar? What instruments do you play?
oh yeah,
And then we'll
I
continue.
play guitar. I sing lead vocals. Play a little bass. I have a couple different world instruments that I tinker with, but I took piano lessons, drum lessons, but guitar really has always been my main instrument.
Your main
Um,
thing. All right. Thank you.
yeah. But yeah, so it just, for me, when I got out here, it was just a big part of my life. It was kind of a way for me to, it was kind of my adult Ritalin, right? It just helped me kind of keep things in check, and I noticed the health benefits that I was getting from it, and the focus levels that I could get. A lot of people just get stoned and kind of laying around out of their mind, but I found particular strains, especially purple
Mm.
strains, for instance, for me really work great. Like if I take a straight sativa strain, it's very uppity, it's very jittery, it's more of an upper. And if I do a straight sativa, I'm putting the cereal box in the fridge, I'm forgetting my name, it's a whole mess. But with the purple strains, they just kind of seem to balance me out to where I feel very focused and very present. I still feel a little bit of that like upliftment, that high from it,
Hmm.
because it raises my vibration to a certain level that I feel very comfortable at. And then with indica strains, a lot of people do indicas and they just get knocked out. But to me, it just kind of mellows me a little bit. So yeah, that's really kind of how I noticed. For me, it was something that I really wanted to experience and to
Let,
to be more involved with.
let me put this in there. So Jeremy was helped me come up with some of these questions.
Yeah.
So one of his questions specifically was, what is the difference between indica, if I say that correctly, uh, sativa and hybrid strains, and how do their effects differ? Which you talked a little bit about that. Would you mind going into that
Yeah.
question a little bit
Well, they're
more?
all they're all different cultivars, and the different types of strains really depend on, in the classification, depends really on their terpenes and their cannabinoids. So terpenes are basically essential oils. So if you've got eucalyptus oil, or well, let's say lavender, for instance. Okay,
Hmm.
lavender has a specific terpene in it called linalool. And linalool is going to be the same terpene that you're going to find in certain cannabis strains. So you see how lavender can have a very calming effect and a very sedating effect, or just a really nice, peaceful, calming effect. So that same exact terpene is the same terpene you're going to find in certain cannabis strains. Limonene is another one. I mentioned sativa. So a lot of sativas have the limonene, or it's a little more uplifting, right? So if you have like an orange or a lemon essential oil, it's usually an uplifting scent. It's usually more bright. It's more opening, more clearing, that type of thing. So the terpenes have a lot to do with the effect that you feel. And then the cannabinoids are the different types of chemicals within the plant that actually open up the experience, right? So we've all heard of THC. THC is tetrahydric cannabinol. That's what actually gets you high. And it's then there's CBD, which is cannabidiol, which doesn't get you high, and you find it more in like hemp plants and things like that. And they're just different components within each chemically that basically make the plant have its particular effect. Sativas are genuinely more uplifting
Hmm.
and more opening and clearing. Indicas are usually more sedative. They're more relaxing. A lot of times they're used more for pain, for heavier pain and things like that. And then a hybrid is going to be kind of a mix of the two. So it's going to have a nice balance depending on if it's more indica dominant or sativa dominant. You're going to have a different experience. And I'll send the link, and you can post it if you'd like to
Yeah.
uh, your viewers. But I penned a really great article on Skunk Magazine a few months ago about the vibrational frequencies of cannabis, and kind of like
So
why do we want to
neat.
get high in the first place, right?
Hmm.
Why do we say getting high? Well, for me, A lot of people say they toke up. Hey man, I'm going to go toke up.
Mhm.
Well, I like to say I'm going to go tune up. Because to me, if you find the right strain, you find the right combination of terpenes and cannabinoids, you're going to get a fine tuning balance. Some people need to lower their frequency a little bit, right? They're too high strung. So that's where the
Yes.
indica comes in. It kind of helps balance them out a little bit. Some people are just too sedative and they need a lift. So that's where the sativas come in, you know. And some people need a little bit of just more of a balance, and that's where the hybrids come in. So finding these different types of strains and things really helps to kind of just dial in where your level of attunement is, right? Because we get knocked out of tune all the time. And if you can imbibe up, and really, if you look at herbs, any kind of herb or any kind of drug, any kind of thing, substance that we put into our body, it's the vibrational frequency of that substance that changes our frequency of our body because we're energy, and people
Mhm.
don't realize how much of energy we get from these substances and things that we take in and put in our bodies. So to me, it's a tuning up by raising or lowering the vibration to that particular pitch.
Okay, and I love you coming at this from a spiritual side as well. So being a cannabis wellness coach, I'm assuming you have to know all I can already tell you're very knowledgeable. So when did you decide, "Hey, that's what I wanna do," or, "I feel
Well,
drawn to this?"
that the wellness coach part of it is really something that just kind of came alongside of a career in it. So when I got off the road touring,
Yeah.
I was out with Brian Head Welch from the band Corn in a solo project of his, and we toured all over the world, and we were getting ready to go on a tour, but we had a new booking agent, and they dropped us down to like $30 a day, and I had a baby coming in a month, and
Oh,
I knew we were going to have several months off of tours, so I ended up finding a job and leaving the road. And it took me a few years to kind of find my way, but then somebody came to me with an opportunity that combined music and cannabis, and I
yes.
was like, well, hey, I got experience in both. Let's try it out. So I applied for it, didn't get the job, but the placement agency said, hey, there's another company that we think you'd be great at, and I ended up being their second hire at that company. We had distro license number 3 in the state, so we were one of the first like legal distribution companies. And I just went in head first, and
Wow.
so the wellness coaching part of it, after a little while, I was taking things from my own life, and to kind of regress a little bit. I used to go see this woman that did iridology, and I don't know if you're familiar with iridology, but where they
I
read the
am, but
iris and
yeah.
kind of tell you what's going on with your body. And this woman would come to this vitamin shop, and it was a big store, and she would be all the way in the back, and she'd come once a month, and there would be a line out all the way through the store, out the back of the store to see the eye lady. I would call her the eye lady, and so I was fascinated by this. And what really struck me is that she only sold one brand, and they had every single SKU of that brand on the wall behind her. And, as a sales guy too, I'm like, how did they get all this brand to have every SKU in here? But that was it. She was there once a month selling that product for that company. So when
Mhm.
I got into cannabis, I thought, why aren't we doing these wellness Wednesdays, or something like that, where we have people coming into these dispensaries asking people what their interest is in cannabis. What are you using it for? How are you using it? What is it you're trying to treat? Well, I want to get high. Well, are you getting high to lift yourself out of something emotionally, or are you doing it because you have a physical ailment that you want to, work through, or things like that? And once you start asking those kind of questions, it really opens up to the individual. Wow, this is really interesting information. So
Mhm.
I found that there was a doctor in Maine. His name's Dustin Sulak, who did cannabis wellness coaching, and he had already at that time he'd worked with, I think, 45,000 patients using cannabis
Just
through medical scientific grants and programs that he was involved in. So I took his course, and did the whole THC module, and then went back and did the CBD, and then I recently did one on dosing and some other things. So to me, it was just a way to round out my knowledge as a salesperson in a sales leader, to empower my salespeople to be able to go out and really speak to the person about why they're using it, rather than just go out and sell something for somebody to get high off of.
right.
Um,
Okay. Well,
so
alright, so California, it's legal. It's not legal in Ohio yet, but it's on the ballot again in a couple months. How many states is it legal in right now? We're
I'm not
October
100% sure
2023.
exactly, but I want to say that there's probably close to 20 or upwards of 20 states now that have some sort of a legal, whether it's fully recreational or medicinal.
Yeah,
I know,
here's medicinal.
so I know there's a lot of places that have medical programs, and recreationally, we're starting to see it open up more places. So I would say probably
Okay.
14 to 20, somewhere in there right now we're at, with recreational, creeping up. So yeah.
Okay. So what are some of the challenges that cannabis can really help with? Physical, emotional. And I know you talked about your ADHD, which is that it kind of connected things for you. So yeah, what else? And knowing there's a plethora of things that it can assist with.
Well, I mean, again, from my own experience, I had some stomach issues for a while, and we weren't really sure what was going on, and I tried a bunch of different things diet wise and things like that. But I found some particular strains that kind of helped ease my stomach issue and helped me with digestion more and things like that. And then what I notice is now that my stomach feels better, my mind isn't thinking about my stomach pain. And now my mind is more clear and my thinking is more clear because I'm not focused on this pain all the time. And
Hmm.
now I can actually see what I've been missing by spending all my time and energy focused on the stomach pain. So it really is kind of a magic, I don't want to say magic pill, but in that respect, if you can find individual things that you can treat with it. A lot of people use it for sleep. It's a great sleep aid. I know a lot of people that suffer from PTSD, and a lot of veterans will use indica strains at night before they go to sleep, because they have terrible nightmares. And if you have a good, strong indica strain, and it could be some other strains too, it kind of helps the dreams not come. So if you smoke a lot at night before going to bed, a lot of times you don't have your dreams can be more vivid, but they can be more lucid. They could be more non-existent for some people as well. So a lot of people will use it to help with insomnia, to help kind of that half awake, half dreaming state to kind of subside to where you can really get a restful sleep. There's so much more now there's drinks, there's with the edibles, the
Yeah.
balms, and use this balm called Papa and Barkley, and it's like a healing balm for all kinds of different things. And as far as back pain or knee pain, my mom has fibromyalgia, so I get her some of this stuff whenever I can, and she just raves about it. She's like, nothing in the world works like this stuff. And
Mm.
so there's so many different areas of wellness that aside from just being in tune and raising or lowering your vibration, you can really pinpoint specific things. So I think a lot with your diet and your stomach wellness, things like that, pain, discomfort, sleep. A lot of and a lot of those are the main issues that people have. Depression. People deal with depression and anxiety a lot. Some people get paranoid, right? When they smoke, they say, "Oh, I smoke and I get paranoid." Well, they're probably high strung, high energy people already, and then they get into the sativa, and like me, they start, they're raising their vibration too high because they're already too high, right? So they
Mhm.
need to find something that's going to lower their frequency to balance it more, things like that. So it's really finding the different combinations of things that help and bring you into a state of wellness, and that's really what I think is missing a lot in the promotion of cannabis, is that it really is an herb for wellness. And wellness can just be, yeah, getting high and feeling better after a long day at work. That is wellness as well. But there's so many degrees of what cannabis can do really to help somebody. And now there's different cannabinoids. I spoke about CBD and THC. If you use CBN is really great for sleep and relaxation and things like that. And a lot of the other CBG is really good for the nervous system and different things like that. So yeah, there's so many different avenues with the cannabinoids and the terpenes that can be done to kind of dial all that in.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so could someone connect with you individually to learn more or to have them help with them specifically? How do you work?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. Somebody can reach me right through my website. My company, Higher Vibes Solutions.
Hmm. And I'll
It's
post all
just
this.
SVH at highervibesolutions.com. is my email. And I get people frequently reach out. I was on a podcast a couple years ago with a lovely young lady that she works with children. And she was really interested in finding out what I thought about CBD. And I said, well, I can tell you from my own experience. I have a daughter. I was hyperactive, and I'm such a giving that I gifted that to her. And so she suffers from some of those same kind of tendencies and things like that. And I got her on some CBD drops when she was about maybe 5 or 6, and she'd have these episodes where it was like she'd be the sweetest little thing, and then 5 minutes later, it's like everything, the tables are getting flipped over, things are getting thrown all over the house, kicking the dog, and I'm like, where's my sweet girl at, and I found that the CBD really helped a lot. And so I would just put a little dropper full in her juice, in her, juice bottle, and it's non-psychoactive. It doesn't have any THC or anything, so I wasn't drugging my child or anything.
Right.
But when I did that podcast, it really opened up a lot. And I still have parents call me today. That was probably 3-4 years ago. And I'll get a random call from somebody. I don't know how they got my number. And they're just like, can I talk to you about my kid and CBD? And I'm like, yeah. And I love it.
That's so important with all the medicine and pharmaceuticals that kids are fed to numb them out. Let me ask you this, Scott, in terms of Western medicine and this being such a natural product, and that the pharmaceuticals, I believe, are wanting to suppress all of this because also they can't make millions and millions of dollars off what they've been propagating. What would you say to that?
Oh, I agree. I mean, unfortunately, the pharmaceutical industry is not it's not a wellness industry. It's you got to keep you sick in order to keep the customer there, right? So you go in, you get a pill, you take it, and it might relieve the symptom for a little while, but then it creates another symptom, and then you got to go back and get another pill to take care of that, and it just becomes a continuous cycle
of sickness.
A sickness, and you're lowering your we talk about frequency and vibration. You're lowering your vibration with every pill that you're taking. I had a bandmate at one point. He was on 17 Vicodin a day.
Oh, jeez.
And I'm like, dude, if you would just smoke some indica, like your liver's gonna love you, and you're gonna feel way better, and you're not gonna be such a jerk all the time. So. That's where it is. But I think that's a big part of it. I think that the pharmaceutical industry is designed to keep people sick, unfortunately. And I think there are times when it's necessary. There are, extremes where you need something to get better, and you need it to get better quick. But I honestly think cannabis isn't a cure-all, but it can cure a hell of a lot.
Very nice. I think we're going to go into the Just Be practice right here. And of course, I didn't stick with 50 because there's so much we could talk about, and even more. I do want to ask you before we go into the practice. Have you seen Congresswoman? Say it again?
We'll do a part 2 anytime.
Oh, there we go. Have you seen Congresswoman Katie Hobbs and her whiteboard?
I have not, no.
Okay, I
stay away from mainstream media as much as possible.
She is a dynamo. She basically, I've seen 2 videos of her where she's interviewing directors, CEOs of the pharmaceutical industry, and she pulls out this whiteboard. Oh, Scott Slink's in there. This whiteboard, and she puts down figures. She is great. She is so great. She nails them to the wall, and she's like, how much did your drug cost in, say, 5 years ago? And he's like, well, she's like, oh, it cost $263. How much does it drug cost right now? So she'll write it on her whiteboard. Now it's $873. And they just sit there and go, oh, it's great. Okay. Beautiful.
I've seen her rant about electric cars. It's equally as entertaining.
Okay, so you have seen her. Yeah, she's great. All right, what do you have in store for us today to help raise our vibration?
Just Be practice.
I'm ready.
Well, I would say go run to your closest dispensary and buy some cannabis flower. No, I'm just kidding. No, there's a lot of people get really hung up on meditation, and people get the idea of it and the concept of it, and it's like it has to be this form, and I can't sit still like that for a while and things like that. But it's really simple to just kind of be present with the breath, and that's what we work a lot in the Sufi practices is working with the breath. We do work with different chants. We work a lot with the 99 divine names of God, and we'll talk about those particular and their qualities, right? So it's a quality that you're invoking that quality, then you bring that quality into your presence, and then you kind of let go of the thought of it and just be in the presence of that quality. So that's a lot of the practices that we do. But one I thought that I would share with your audience was basically a real elemental practice that we start with early on, and it's the five elements breaths, or the elemental breaths, and it's a real simple practice. And basically, what it does is it really is like a reset button for your body.
Oh, nice.
And it is something that can really bring you into a whole different state of mind. But it's basically 20 breaths. 25 breaths really if you add the ether element at the end, but it's a real simple practice. So it's basically taking 5 breaths, breathing in through the nose and out through the nose, and that's the earth breath. And what that does is it grounds you to the earth. So it's a very solid, very grounding, very stabilizing energy. So you do 5 breaths in through the nose, out through the nose, and then you follow it with a water breath, which is in through the nose and out through the mouth. So it's kind of that, you think of a waterfall and that kind of cascading, cleansing, purifying, washing kind of feeling. And that when you breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth, you get that same kind of a feeling and experience. Then the next 5 breaths are the fire breath, which is opposite. It's breathing in through the mouth and out through the nose. And a lot of times you'll even feel a little heat in the nostril from that. You're breathing in, and it's that raising, expanding energy, rising energy, that type of thing. So that's the fire breath. And then it kind of coalesces then into the water breath, or I'm sorry, air breath, which is just in through the mouth, out through the mouth. The air quality, alchemically speaking, is a very zigzag energy. It's kind of all over the place, but it can be very light. It can be very wistful, those types of things. So it's bringing in that energy through the breath of the mouth. And then tying it all in together is the ether quality. And that, again, is just breathing in through the nose and out through the nose, but very subtle. So it's not so much of a pronounced, but much more of a silent breathing in and out. And that really contains all of the elements together. So these 20, 25 breaths are really, they're called the purification breaths in Sufism. So it
you
really
broke up
is
a little bit. The purification
breaths.
Purification.
So
okay. And I'm assuming,
or purification breaths, they're called.
Okay. And I'm assuming you're going to lead us within that you've given us kind of the intro, and now you're going to help us do one. And I have to tell you, this is so interesting, Scott. So I'm just going to give a little nod to this. I entered into the sacred economy. So at this loom, and every element that you're talking about, we embody each element. So this is going to be so nice for me personally to go through this. All right. Ready.
So, you don't have to curl up in a ball on the floor or, sit crisscross applesauce or anything like that. Just get comfortable. Usually feet on the floor gives you more grounding. And then just take those 5 breaths in through the nose, out through the nose, feeling the groundedness of the earth. Again, the earth being a stabilizing energy, grounding, stability. Those are the things that you might feel come up when you're doing that. And then at your own pace, you can move on to the next breath, which again is the water breath, breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth, feeling that flow and that cascade of the cooling effect of it, the kind of cleansing and washing experience. It's also an energetic flow, so the water breath can energize, because water has that energizing quality as well. And then when you're ready, you can move to the fire breath, which is in through the mouth, out through the nose, kind of feeling that heat. You know, and sometimes people will do it with kind of pursed lips, kind of the lips kind of barely open, and you can really kind of feel that heat within the breath rising up. But again, the fire element, very expansive, growing energy. And then when you're ready, you can transition to the air breath, which again is in through the mouth and out through the mouth. And again, the air element is kind of a zigzag energy. It can be very sporadic, it can be very chaotic, but it can also be very calming and very soothing and very, you think about a light breeze on a hot day, that kind of calming sensation that comes from air. And then lastly, you just back to breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth. Very subtle, very light, just kind of the lightest you can. You don't even want to hear yourself breathing. And just kind of keeping in mind that all the elements are contained within the ether. All the vibrations, all the frequencies that we spoke about through the whole show are all whisking around in the ether. So grab onto what feels good to you. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and come back to life.
Really interesting. My one comment that I'm going to give: when I was doing the air breath, my eyes were closed, but they zigzagged back and forth.
Interesting.
And then it all calmed down.
Yeah. Well, like I said, those are called the purification breaths. So, along with, diet, exercise, things like that we do to purify ourselves, the breath, is something that people take for granted all the time. So doing those particular breaths are a purification. They really do get the toxins out of the body. So you can do this multiple times a day. It's a practice I do every morning. It's like my morning practice. Sometimes I'll do it in the evening, or if I'm really stressed out and having a terrible day and things are chaotic, I'll find a quiet place and I'll go do the 20 breaths. It just resets everything, kind of gets you calmed down. So I hope that's helpful.
It's very helpful, because it is. I feel very pure. Yeah, but it is very very calming, very I don't know, just really, really good. Scott, thank you for all of your information. Again, we could have gone into many more discussions, and I'll have all of Scott's contact information. And if you're listening to this, it'll be in Spotify, Google, all those different audio podcasts, and then on YouTube and everything. Say it again.
Wherever podcasts are sold.
Wherever podcasts are sold. Man, thank you so much from California. Thank you so much for sharing all this info. I think that's it.
All right.
See y'all later. Stay with me, Scott. Bye, everybody. Ooh, that says end. Okay, stop recording. So cool of you to be here. I went from being off most social media to being on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, True Social, and you might be watching this on YouTube, Rumble, or BitChute. Or you might be listening to this on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. I'm on over 19 directories at this point. So connect, comment, subscribe, like. Oh, and my intention is to have a new episode out Wednesday of each week. Oh, Lordy, more to come.